So to start with the sketch, I'm going to kind of use this really flowy line that is the top of his body. It's going to dip down in the middle just a little bit. This is kind of showing him in the swimming position as he paddles with his tail. His tail here at the end is going to curve back up a little, and it's pretty thin because all you see is the side. And then I'm going to start on the bottom. As I draw this, I'm imagining this dense oval here in the middle of his body, and this is really going to help show his form. If you need this to feel comfortable, go ahead and draw it. You can always erase it later. And now I'm just connecting the bottom of that oval to the head and the tail. As you can see, I drew a line, but I wanted it to be a little more steep and kind of exaggerated to really get some motion in the sketch and really show that he's swimming. I'm just cleaning up my sketch here and there with the kneaded eraser. And now I'm going to start drawing his fins, or as I like to think of them, his swimmy sidearms. And the thing to note with these is they're a bit longer than you might expect. So when I was drawing, I kind of wanted to draw them a little bit shorter, and then when I double checked my reference, they extend quite a way past the bottom of his belly. So just kind of double check and make sure you're really getting your proportions right here and capturing his true size. And next I'm going to start on his mouth. That's going to start kind of at the tip of his head and then swoop down, kind of follow the line of his body. His eye lies between his mouth and his fin, and then here's kind of a texture change on his skin. It's a lighter color, so I make spots for that, and then I kind of just define the tail a little bit more. So for today I'll be using two different shades of blue. The first one is a really bright phthalo blue. This will be the main local color for the whale. The second color I'll be using for the shadows, and this is a darker indigo. If you don't have these exact shades of blue, or you only have one blue, don't worry. Just mix a second well with that blue that you do have and mix a little bit of brown into it, and you'll get a darker blue that you can use for your shadows. Now I'm just practicing my blending here and making sure that the blues look really good together. So to start, I'm going to lay down the darker blue along the bottom back half of his body. And then while I still have a lot of paint on the paper, I'm going to come in with my lighter phthalo blue and mix it on the page along the middle section of his body. Now I'm going to use a clean brush to soften that edge and create a gradient that will kind of show the sunlight that's bouncing off of him through the water. Now I'm just cleaning up some edges. And using the dark blue again, I'm going to kind of outline the bottom. This is kind of the shadow, the underside of his belly that doesn't see any light. And now, still using the darker blue, I'm going to add a shadow that is in front of his fin. And then while it's still wet, I'm going to switch back to the phthalo blue and line the bottom of his belly with that, making sure to blend everything along the way. And kind of pull that color up towards his mouth. And then I'm going to use the same trick as before to use a clean, damp brush to kind of soften and blend that edge right there. And now, since this is a student grade paper, I'm going to wet that area with the shadows, and you can see it did dry a little bit too much because the paper doesn't really absorb the water and let it sit for a while. But now I'm going to take the lighter blue and start on his top and kind of soften edges where I can and blend into the shadow area that I've already painted. And then I am going to do a wash across the back just to kind of bring down that value a little bit. And now, as I continue to soften edges, you can see it's starting to look like a whale now. And now I'm going to use the darker blue to really build up my shadows and get a much darker value there. And for the tail here, there wasn't a lot of detail in my reference photo, so I kind of wanted to be a little more abstract and kind of subtly suggest the tail. I did notice there was a darker spot where it seemed like it kind of curved down, so I added a dash of the darker blue on the tip. So from here on out, it's mostly making sure that I'm building up my values. I just want to make sure that my shadows are dark enough and even my midtones are a color that I'm after. I want to make sure they're saturated enough. As you can see, I'm going to add a little bit more of the phthalo blue to the top. Also, by bringing these midtones down some and slowly building up contrast, it also helps to make the lighter areas like his mouth and back a lot more bright and vibrant. Now I'm using kind of a glazing technique to layer and build up an even more saturated and vibrant blue here. And now I'm going to start on his fins, and I wanted to do a wet on wet technique because in my reference photo he had these really soft kind of pale areas that outlined his fin. Full transparency. Is that like a watercolor pun? I don't know. That was meant to be clean water that I laid down, so don't try to feel like you need to get a pale blue. It really should have been clean. And then I'm just laying down my paint in that water and letting it flow to really make some really nice soft edges. Now I'm just getting that darker blue and bringing it into the fin and making sure that I've got a dark enough value. And as I clean up that bead, I kind of made a line, so I'm using a paper towel to lift that. And you'll see I come back in with a damp brush again to try and lift a little bit more, and that's about what I'm after anyway. So, and then just more glazing kind of that dark blue, the indigo. And now that this is kind of starting to look like a whale, I'm going to clean up some of the white of the paper that I still have left in these kind of corners and just start cementing it all together and start on the next fin. And since you're not really seeing the color pattern on this fin and it's more just a shadow, I'm going to use a really light wash from my indigo color and not use quite wet on wet. I'm going to make sure I drop in a darker shadow at the top and make sure it blends, but I don't need the super soft edges that I had on the other fin. Now that I'm happy with my gradient, I'm going to make these fin shaped and kind of clean up the majority of those edges. So next I'll be starting on some of the fine details that will really make this piece come together. I'm going to start on the mouth, and for this I'm using a pretty small round brush, and it's almost perpendicular to the page. It's almost fully upright, and this is with the darker indigo blue. For his eye, I'm trying to make sure that I get the circle around the outside to kind of create that definition, but then I'm trying to leave the top half of the circle a lot lighter, so once I kind of fill it in, I lift with a damp brush. So I am starting on more details, and I realized at this point I didn't want to tell you guys that I was just painting his face bumps. And so I decided to look it up, and for a little bit of whale trivia, those are apparently actually hair follicles that help the whale sense water vibrations. So essentially you could say I'm painting his goatee right now, and for those really thin stripes I'm doing these flicking motions with the brush upright again just to get really thin lines, and I'm softening those hair follicles just a little bit. And now I'm just gonna get some indigo and go back over the eye again and kind of make an outline. I just really want to give the appearance of it sitting in a socket. And since this is already so small and abstract, I just want to add a little bit more definition there. And now after cleaning up a little bit, I think I'm ready to move on to the background. So I knew for this background that I wanted kind of a pale blue, splashy, abstract background. I thought it would be reminiscent of water and the ocean, but not really distract from my whale. I started by mixing a pale blue-green color. I added just the smallest bit of green to my phthalo blue and tons of water. And I'm using my Quill brush. It holds so much water, so it's great for painting backgrounds. So I also wanted some cauliflower effects, so it kind of implies some splashes and water. And to do that, if you've never done cauliflower effects before, I'm just getting clean drops of water and putting it directly onto paint I've already laid down. And as you can see, it just kind of explodes, kind of making sure that I do it just before the paint dries, but not while it's still wet. So also with this background, I decided that I wanted to kind of leave a little bit of spacing between the whale and my background. With this being a student grade paper, I had a lot of hard edges that contributed to a really glazed look with the whale, and between that and the cauliflower effect, I thought that leaving a little bit of outline would suggest a very nice loose watercolor sketch. The really important part here is just have fun, be loose, play around with your brush strokes and color and water and see what kind of effects you can get and just have fun with it. Now I'm just finishing up, so I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope you found it helpful. I'll link to all my materials in the description below. These links are at no cost to you, but just help support the channel, so feel free to check them out. Please let me know what other tutorials you guys want to see in the comments below, and as always, thank you so much for stopping by and watching.